He basically said that I have to come with a joke, but well, has everyone had a good time so far? I mean, yay! Woo! It's a C. All right. Flash loans. To keep image. But yeah, okay, I think we can start. So my name is Stani. I'm from Aave. Aave basically does lending DeFi products, and we have this cool thing called flash loans. Just a quick check. How many of you guys have heard about flash loans? Oh, pretty cool. That's why you're probably here. So yeah. What I want to do today is basically go a few points about flash loans. So kind of a bit of like misconceptions and also what kind of different varieties there are of flash loans. So what you can actually do with them. And I have made a categorization of the good, the bad, and the ugly. The idea is kind of to show that flash loans is an interesting tool, but it could be used in a like good way or in a bad way. And some of you have already seen like different kinds of way of using them. Now, in essence, what is a flash loan and how it differs from just normal DeFi loan? And by normal DeFi loan, what I'm trying to refer is to a over-collateralized loans. So as we know, DeFi, decentralized finance, is pretty about trustless transactions, which basically means that you make transactions where you don't need to trust the other party. So you need to protect somehow the transaction. And one way is to over-collateralize a loan position. Now, how basically the flash loans differ from this kind of like over-collateralized loan position is that you are taking a loan and you're returning the loan without any collateral. And the ability to do this kind of transaction in the trustless environment is a way of using the atomicity of the Ethereum network. So basically, there's three steps. First, you take the loan. Second is pretty much you do whatever you want to do with that loan, and you return the loan. And the key part of the flash loan is basically the condition set in the lending protocols that basically, if you don't return the loan, your basically nested transactions will eventually fail. So that's the condition. Now, between this borrowing and returning, you can actually do pretty much everything that you can in the atomic nature. Typical use cases for flash loan could be arbitrage. So what helps you, what flash loans in general helps you to do is to innovate in terms of the composability of DeFi without actually needing that capital. So I'm quoting here also a bit of my friend Mark Zeller, who is in the crowd. It's there. Nice weather, by the way. It used to be in this way that there was nerds, and now we have nerds with money, and not just like with money, but whale-like liquidity. So the only thing you actually need now is to pretty much have enough technical skills to do different kinds of transactions without actually having that whale-like capital. And you can build very interesting things like arbitrage bots, collateral swaps, interest rate swaps, currency swaps. self-liquidations. We'll go a bit deeper, like what are these different things and leverage aggregators. The first thing we need to understand is pretty much that in the current form, using flash loans is a pretty much developer tool at this moment. But once the developer community starts to build different kinds of interesting things, products on hackathons for the end users, we actually see some interesting utilization beyond the arbitrage bots or any kind of like a trading strategies, which we have seen in the good category and even in the bad category. Yeah. And one of the interesting parts, for example, is the self-liquidation use case, where you're building a bot or a service for end users who have CDPs, that they can actually liquidate their own loan positions without returning the loan, which basically means that you are not in the position of relying upon the liquidation networks of the lending protocols. For example, the MakerDAO system. And that basically is a product that helps end users to save on the discounts, on liquidations, and basically affects a bit the way that the whole liquidation system is used. So if everyone is liquidating themselves, it pretty much destroys a bit the liquidation network incentives that we have in many lending protocols today. And of course, these use cases that we go today, they're just an examples what you can do. So this is something that our team just tried to figure out within the past months. And I'm pretty sure that there's something else to add and a lot of things that could be built upon. But today is not only about the kind of like what kind of products you can build, but also like how these ideas came and how we made them possible. So this is a very cool thing that happened. So in normal arbitrage situation, which basically means that you are trying to rely upon inefficiencies in the trading network. So you have a decentralized exchange 1 and decentralized exchange 2, or liquidity pools, whatever you want to call them. You're buying an asset in arbitrage, in the DEX 1 and selling in the DEX 2 for a higher price and trying to gain for the price inefficiency. And to do that, you basically have to have capital. And what flash loans enable to do the arbitrage DAO and Julian, who started the project, was basically to make these arbitrage opportunities and take advantage of them without actually having any capital. And that's like a very cool initiative to see. And the point here is that you borrow first under collateralized loan. You buy from one place and sell the another place, and then you reimburse the loan. And here's an example of the arbitrage DAO transaction. So all of these are nested transactions within the transaction that Julian made. That was the first flash loan basically done with our protocol. And this, I'm not going too much into details, but what can I say from this particular set of transactions is that Julian basically took a flash loan and he went into a trade between Sai and Dai, where he found a inefficiency in the price, and basically bought one of the currency in one place and sold it in another place and returned the loan. And you can, of course, configure your bot to make opportunities that actually make sense to you and the pairs that you actually want. So you don't need to just borrow DAI, but you can borrow any currency that there's excess liquidity available. And to have that excess liquidity in the protocol, you have to incentivize somehow the liquidity providers to bring your flash capital. So it's pretty simple transaction. There's multiple components at this point. But the key here is to see that between the borrowing transaction and the repay transaction, you can actually put all kinds of things in between and actually build very, very complex things. And the things that we are seeing now currently in different, for example, the flash loan attacks as well. The transactions are getting complex, but this is just kind of like a starting point of what we will see in the future, because you can actually put a lot of things in between there, and you're basically limited solely by the block size of a Ethereum block. This was another cool thing called collateral swaps. And I was brainstorming with Mariano Conti in Telegram, the place where we all hang, usually. And one of the things where I was asking Mariano that can I open a vault with two collaterals? So I have, for example, in the same vault, collateral A, let's say Ethereum, collateral B, BAT, and then just change the collaterals. And that pretty much wasn't available, and without returning the loan. And I said basically that, okay, what could be actually cool? You could use flash loans to return. You can close your vault. Let's say you have a vault with collateral that is BAT, which is basically your long position. You got your DAI, and you basically already spent that DAI. And you want to change your long position from BAT to ETH for some particular reason. For example, you see more upside there, or increased risk in BUT or whatnot. And basically with Flash Loan, you can actually borrow DAI in same transaction, close a BAT CDP, and open a the CDP of ETH, and return that in the same Flash Loan transaction. And I actually asked that, could someone basically build this thing? And I will start to use it, and a bunch of my other friends. And I think it was, yeah, David came and said that, hey, I want to build this thing, and I want to try to build it. Just like, this was just an idea from nowhere, and just an interesting way of utilizing flash loans and the composability of Ethereum, the DeFi. And David basically created the whole thing. He did a tweet with a couple of example transactions between swaps BAT and Ethereum BAT. And then he had the hashtags YOLO, not audited, which is, not, I mean, it's a start, but you know, it's just a proof of concept. And then Fiona came also and tried what David actually built, and got interested in the whole flash loans and what we were building. And I think the cool part in this particular project was that what we made was David, who is basically a developer, and he doesn't have whale-like capital or liquidity, could actually build something very cool, and let other people like Fiona to utilize that product. And when we start to see more and more this kind of things and composability and on Ethereum, without the much need of a capital, we will see more sparks in the innovation. And that was like very interesting, like story behind of this particular flash loan use case. Here's the transaction pretty much. So there was DAI borrowed, BAT vault was closed, and then the ETH vault was open, and the DAI was returned. So pretty cool stuff. Here's the kind of like a bad example. Well, not bad example, but let's say like this was a attack used by flash loans. So what happened? There was recently a few attacks on the BZX protocol, and what happened is that the borrower took a flash loan. By the way, this is made by a friend of ours, Kerman, but the flash loan wasn't from Aave, so that's all the information. But how it basically worked, that the attacker took a very large amount of flash liquidity and converted those portion of that liquidity into a WBTC, which is a low liquid asset, and basically sold that asset in particular decentralized exchanges, which affected this price of Uniswap liquidity pool. And he had at the same time a short position on WBTC with leverage. So he needed less actually funds to take that position, and gained yield by crashing the price feed and making pretty substantial amount of money in that attack. So this is a pretty interesting example, like how the flash loan affected the whole ecosystem. Because previously we always thought about that you can have this kind of like attacks if you are very well funded. And what flash loan actually allows you to do is that it takes out the funding equation and funds every attacker. So your system needs to be resilient as well, this kind of attacks, so that any kind of possibility with big amount of funds can be used against your system. And that's why when you're planning your systems and building DeFi, you need to basically take that into account. And the very problematic part is that the more you have DEX liquidity, the more you actually have also the lending liquidity. So the ratio will never change, and you need to find different ways to protect your system, and you can't rely particularly in the DEX liquidity. I mean, the DEX, even the growth of the DEX liquidity. Some other stuff related to the flash loan is that there's possible to do a governance attacks. There wasn't yet any this kind of attacks in place, but was a lot of discussion about the governance attack in Maker, when you can actually get a lot of MKR liquidity and make an attack. And I think this was funny tweet from Rune that Maker governance was well planned and a lot of effort was put there, yada, 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 Twitter mob, and then faith in humanity drained by a flash loan. So it's for me, the funny part is that like we designed systems in very careful manner, but the thing with flash loans is that actually they always existed in form of attacks. And what they actually did, the flash loan liquidity itself, it's basically made them just available to everyone to try it out. So that's why like it's important to take always niche cases when you design systems. Yeah, so there was the discussion went even further, and Amin wanted to kind of like spark more conversation, and was planning a Taker DAO and partly without flash loans and with, depending on the pooling model, and to kind of like make sure that there isn't this kind of attack on the MakerDAO system. But it was very interesting discussion, and it just shows like how flash loans like affected everyone, and not just basically the DeFi protocol level, but on the governance level as well. So that was pretty cool stuff. And I know I didn't have much time, but this was like kind of like a LE5 quick intro into flash loans. So I got something for you. If you want to follow the flash loan activity on Aave, we have a dashboard there, and there's some stuff there. You can inspect the different flash loans. There's on a daily basis, I would say, from 5 to 10 different kinds of flash loans, and some of them are refinancing, for example, from one protocol to another. So you could basically refinance. One quick example about interesting use case in flash loans is that you might be on a, let's say, 8% interest on DAI borrowing. You could refinance that to another lending protocol, let's say to Compound, where USDC might be, for example, 4% without returning the loan by using flash loans. So you borrow from the Aave protocol, and end of the day, before you return the USDC, you are converting it back to DAI and returning to Aave. And this is like the cool part, like how the composability is getting even like a step further in DeFi. So this first one, QR code, here you can follow, it's Aave Watch. It's made by our community member, and you can find there one section with all flash loans. And for all your hackers, developers, and if you want to do some cool stuff with the flash loans, that's QR code there. That will help you go to the documentation of Aave, and you have a tutorial example how you could do your very first flash loan. And it's very particular, and if you have any interesting use cases or discussions, just reach me out or our team, and we would really like to talk about this. I personally think that the topic of the flash loans is not settled yet. There's still many issues to be solved, and I think people just need to think this harder. And I think there's now a lot of effort put in security auditings, particularly into flash loans, and also people are building pretty cool stuff in terms of flash loans. That's it about. If you guys have any questions, we'll be happy to answer as well. Thank you.
I think we don't have much time for questions, so it has to be 1 or 2 max. Anyone has a really good question? Yeah.
It's really interesting. If you remember the financial crisis of 2008 on Wall Street, right? There were all kinds of financial innovation and collateralized obligations and loans. And then it turned out there were these nonlinear dependencies that pretty much brought the entire thing to zero. So I just want to hear your opinion. When people start creating these very complex securities, and most of users don't understand that being collateralized doesn't mean at all it's secure. You can go to zero. So can we approach a point that someone creates an algorithm and you wake up and there's no compound finance, there's no MakerDAO? How do we create some kind of self-regulation or regulation not to create systemic risk in the system that will literally bring, like in several minutes, the entire DeFi, down?
That's an interesting question. I think with the 2008, what's interesting, a bit different that we have now is that to this point is that all this, there's different banks with the so-called toxic assets. And basically, no one was actually sure how many assets there was this particular asset class. So the risk of the exposure was unknown. And what's cool about DeFi is that you kind of know the exposure in the DeFi world. But once you are starting to tokenize things and you're putting more things into DeFi that are not completely, let's say, cryptographic or relying to cryptography. Let's say, for example, a tokenization of fiat currencies. So we are not sure how much there's actual fiat in some bank accounts. So we have a very similar problem. But the good thing is that there's very big accountability within the DeFi system, and you can track everything and see everything. But once we tokenize things, which is probably something that will come as well in a larger spectrum, then we will see the very same problems. And I think system just needs to be more resilient. And I think I would like to say that governance is very important because it brings the flexibility to solve issues when things are going wrong. And Ethereum community is also we tend to forget that we have done very good decisions in the past just to save the systems. And I think that's because of the governance, and there's smart people here and coming to good conclusions, and that's why we have the best community ever. So,
woo! Anyone else? One question.
Yes, following the recent activity with flash loans, there has been a lot of wild proposals on Twitter. One of those was to integrate flash loan capability directly inside the ERC20 tokens. Is it something you've considered? What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think if you mean the one-on-one pegged, basically, that you can tokenize a kind of flash loan position by just minting the token, right? Yeah, the issue there is that if you have, we can just look at the traditional financial system. Let's say we have a bank that can mint just unlimited amount of capital for a short period of time. And if it's accessible to everyone to do those kinds of transactions, it really might break the system, because you basically not just the good thing about the current flash loan architectures is that you have the capital is there, you have certain amount of capital, but it's not completely unlimited. But if you have unlimited amount of capital, you basically can break any system that there is. So I don't think that it's sustainable. I hope no one tries to push it too far, because it might cause a lot of issues. But also, yeah, I think it's just very difficult one to pull in a way that it really doesn't harm the systems, because at least the current form of flash loans, you can mitigate that kind of risk. But also I would like to see like if it brings any new use cases as well. But I've been following that a lot as well, and it's an interesting discussion.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you.